going on in the world. A lot is going on in this country, and a whole lot is going on in the state of Maryland. And we want to get started with the monologue, get it out of the way. We have some substantial guests on the call today, on the Zoom today. And but first, I want to acknowledge the support we've gotten since we started doing this thing. We have substantial support from our producer William Honeyblue, who is kind of in the background, but he is kind of the key to pulling this thing together. We also have support across what we do with NAACP from several of our sponsors. We want to mention the American Heart Association, Living Legacy Foundation, and I also want to mention a new one because we have support in Howard County with our community, our George Washington Carver CSA and Community Garden with the Community and Ecology Institute, but also Lowerland Farms, which is in Western Howard County. And if you've never been there, it's substantial. They do, you can go and pick your own fruit and vegetables throughout the growing season, and they donated a lot of apples to us. So if you're on this call and you want some apples, inbox me, and we'll see if we can get you some. But to get into the monologue today, we want to talk about a, a presidential election in the country of Kenya. And there's a brother named William Ruto who has become the president-elect of Kenya. And what this means for Kenya is that they have a very young 55-year-old, I guess that's young these days, very young um, president of the country, president-elect of the country, who came up from the grassroots. Substantial story. Sounds like the story of basically um, President Jimmy Carter. He was a farmer who became went to school, educated himself, put himself through college, and decided to run for public office. And the rest is history. And now he's set to be the president of one of the most significant countries on the continent of Africa. So listen out for good things from President-elect, future President William Ruto, and that's substantial as far as I'm concerned. To be the president of a country at 55 is substantial. So send up some well wishes for him. I also want to acknowledge an incident that happened recently in Argentina. It turns out that the vice president of Argentina it was an attempted assassination plot on her life. I don't know what her religious or spiritual background is, but someone put a gun to her head, and the gun did not go off. Luckily, her name is Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, and luckily she's alive. Nobody was harmed, and I don't know what they've done to the young man, but I don't think he'll be have his hands on any guns anytime soon. I'll just put it that way. And the significance of that, as much as we talk about the challenges that we have in America with guns, I don't think anybody has ever recently put a gun to the head of any of our high-level elected leaders. So I don't think it's just America anymore. It's about insanity and this commitment to pain and trauma, I guess. But be on the lookout. We also have good news coming out of Alaska, which is good news for those who've been watching this thing in the Republican Party for the last, I guess, since 2008, I think it was, or 2007, when Sarah Palin came on the scene. She's a rock star for the Republicans. She was kind of a little right of her presidential running mate, John McCain. Quite frankly, I think she's probably the reason John McCain did not win. I didn't come close to winning. I think that race was meant for President Barack Obama at that time in history. But she has kind of been, a Republican fundraiser, whatever you do when you have the status that she had, and ended up in some kind of connection with other than MAGA Republican himself, um, Donald Trump. And so it was expected that she was going to blow through the primary or the special election for Congress in Alaska because she was a governor and she had this reputation. She obviously had support of Trump, and she also, I'm sure she's a good fundraiser for herself. But she came up 5,000 votes short, or 5,000 or something in a special election, which bodes well for the Democratic Party and it bodes well for her opponent because it'll be, kind of tough for her to pull it off. But I'm happy, the rest of the world is happy because in a situation where Donald Trump has had a lot of success, quite frankly, on the mainland with people who follow his direction to run. This is a race that everybody looked at, and everybody kind of thought that she was going to win. But I think that what played out in that race was that the people of Alaska stuck with someone who was from there, and that's important in a lot of cases. And I think in this case, it was the best thing for that state. Now, closer to home, we had a kickoff this week of schools around the state. Everybody started back to school, but there was disappointing news coming out of Baltimore because there were 23 schools that couldn't open up, or they opened up, but they couldn't go the full day because they didn't have HVAC systems in place. That was 23 schools, and the drama of that unfolded throughout the week, and I'm sure it still does because there were some 90-degree days. And I don't know if it's the case that the schools themselves, I guess, hoped that it wouldn't be so hot and they could keep people in school. But it turns out that I know Monday and Tuesday and I think Wednesday were 90-degree days. And each one of those days, I think they had to dismiss the young people early. Now, there were other glitches across the state. Howard County, I think they had the problem of locator for the buses. And the point I bring out about that is in Howard County, they got pissed off about the locator on buses, but nobody arrived to school late. Nobody didn't arrive, but they, on social media, they kicked up dust about a locator to find the buses if they got lost, but they didn't get lost. But I'm not saying that nobody was screaming about the fact that there were no air conditioners in schools, but I'm saying that people should be upset that there were no air conditioners in schools. And because I do believe that there's no other county in this state, and I don't think there's any other ethnic group that would allow that to happen. So I encourage anybody who is watching this or has some access to public schools in Baltimore City to get upset about that. Something needs to be done. There's a lot of money with infrastructure development that's supposed to come down a pipe, and I think that some of that money should go into the public schools of Baltimore City, specifically for having substantial HVAC systems in all the schools. Now, I'm going to close with this monologue, and because I think everybody has heard about the speech that Vice President Biden gave last night about the MAGA Republicans, and that's a good thing, I guess, for him because he wants to win an election so that his agenda can be unchallenged by what Republicans do. But what he left out of that speech last night was, first of all, he didn't talk about MAGA Democrats, and there are a few of those that make things hard for all of us. But he also didn't spend time talking about what the real problem is, and that's the history of white supremacy, racism, and all of our policies in the United States. And he did a good job in his debate 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, when he, for the first time in history, called out Donald Trump. I don't think this has ever happened in a presidential debate. He called Donald Trump a racist and a clown. And that was one reason I voted for the man. Not that I had an option, but I was excited about voting for someone who called out a racist clown on public or international television. And I think that's why he won the election. But I would encourage President Biden to call this situation, this period of time for what it is. He only has a few more years. If he runs again, he'll have 4 more years. But either way, he has a substantial role as the last person of his generation to call it what it is. Call the mistakes of the last whatever 200 years or whatever number we've been around in America. Call it what it is. This place was stamped from the beginning to be a setup for racism and white supremacy, and he's in a substantial role to call it what it is, replace what has been done with some semblance of love, and I think we'll be better off. We're going to get into our show today. We're going to open up with Robin Williams. Robin Williams come to us not just as a leader in the NAACP. She's a labor leader, has been for a long time. She's a consultant with the Maryland State Conference, and we're working on several things together. One thing that she's worked on is efforts around tobacco preemption at the state level. And in this last session, we worked together on we worked together to work on a legislation in Montgomery County to add healthy kids meals to the menus in Montgomery County. And she's going to be pivoting to do the same thing in Charles County and Howard County. But today I want her to come on here to talk about labor because we're headed up on Labor Day. This is the last weekend of the year technically, and Labor Day is a part of that. But we want to talk about labor as it pertains to Black folks because it is substantial that we keep Black folks in the dialogue because there's a substantial history of labor and you know what Black people do. So I want to introduce to some and present to others Robin Williams. Are you on there?
Yes. Hi, Willie. How are you?
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for the invite today.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I know everybody's doing something. It's the last weekend of the year, and everybody's getting ready for that. But I wanted to lift everything up around the history of labor as it pertains to Black folks, because even though you know Black people are a substantial part of the labor force and they have always been in this country, it hasn't been the case that we've been treated like everybody else in that space. And what's substantial about that is, despite that, we still have been committed to, you know, producing things for our families and fighting for other people to get jobs, even though we have been mistreated in that labor space. And I know you are connected to the people who established the CBTU, the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, for those who don't know. And you're kind of a young part of that movement. So can you tell us about your experience and how you got involved with labor?
Yes, Willie. Black folks were brought here to America to give free labor, and growing up, my dad always taught us about, hard work. He taught us about slavery and instilled in us that slave mentality should not be in the Williams family. However, hard work. We were a Williams, and we work hard to get where we want to be and what we want to have, and always to try to have the best. He also taught us about unions, right? My father was in a union. He was in a union because he was in the shipyard. He and his brothers were in the shipyard in Virginia, right? And so he knew about unions. He knew that if you had a union job, you get better pay, that Black folks really needed a union. When he moved here from Virginia, he moved here in a metropolitan area, actually to Washington, D.C. He started working for Woody's. He was a truck driver there, and they had formed a union while he was there and became the union that I worked for, United Food and Commercial Workers Union. So, I got involved in the union when I was a federal government worker, and I worked part-time for Safeway, became a shop steward. Um, started working for my union, my local union, UFCW, United Food and Commercial Workers, the local union here in the metropolitan area, Local 400. And then I went on and got promoted to work for the International Union and eventually became the International Vice President and Civil Rights Director. The
So that,
Coalition of Black, the, I'm sorry.
well, I want to just applaud that because, I'm sure you could have just taken advantage of all of the union benefits and all that and stayed in one job. But it seems that you had something that somebody saw in you that put you in leadership. So how did that come about?
Um, the fight, I guess, in me, Willie. My dad was not just a union member and a hard worker, but my dad was a business owner, and my dad was a minister. My dad was a person that if he saw wrong, he would try to handle it. He was one that helped to integrate a lot of the businesses in Ronald Rapids and Weldon, North Carolina, the area that he grew up in, and he pastored there. And so I guess the fight, my father had a fight for the people, and he was my hero. And it instilled in me, and I love to fight. I love to fight for justice
They are
and fight for the
pugilists.
people. And so getting involved in the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, as a Black unionist, the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, and under the leadership of at that time when I joined, Mr. Bill Lucy, taught us leadership skills, right? Taught us how to bargain, taught us how to be leaders sitting at the table with the other, white union presidents, and it was a place where we felt safe, where we as Black union leaders, that we could strategize together. It was birthed. CBTU was birthed out of strategizing, because the AFL-CIO had endorsed Nixon when he was running as president, and Black labor leaders, they were against that endorsement. And so it was birthed out of Black labor activists strategizing for what's best for Black workers. And
Well,
I love it. And
yeah,
that's what
that's
we still do
interesting.
today.
That's
Mhm.
interesting because I never knew the history about labor supporting Nixon, but I think it kind of happens now anyway. But the same thing happened not the Democrats supported Reagan, but I do recall some history about when Reverend Jackson came on the scene that they let Reverend Jackson to the side, and that's what created this movement that Clinton benefited from. So it's pretty interesting that when it's convenient for the mainstream to kick Black folks to the curb, they don't hesitate to do it.
Willie, that is so true. Black folks and Black workers, because we all work, right? If we Black in America, that's the only way we survive. And Willie, kicking us to the curve, it's not just from um, you know uh, labor sometimes, and they don't do it now because I think we have recognized our power, even in the political space, and workers are a big portion of voters, right? So even in this political space, Black workers have, I think, recognized their power. And when they don't recognize it, labor and the NAACP together, we're working to make sure that we have the right messaging for Black voters, right? And we do that with labor. So you and I, being from the NAACP and I from labor, we are one and the same, right? We're we say two organizations with one goal, and that goal is to win political, economic power for Black people.
Right, and I want to I guess confess that my father was a machinist, but and I grew up in a blue collar town. It wasn't no other collar, and the only other collar was a preacher, and that wasn't the direction I was headed. But my father was a machinist, and he made trailers. But my mother was a seamstress,
Uh-huh.
and
Mm-hmm.
they could never unionize at the
Mm-hmm.
company she worked for was called Kleiners, and they could never unionize because of the history of how the owners would pit black folks against white folks, so they never unionized, and
Mm-hmm.
and it's very unfortunate because as you know how that played out, all of the textile industry in the South that left all the northern states over the
Mm-hmm.
years, they would, kick even farther south, whether they went to Mexico or Vietnam or the Asia after 1992 when they passed the North American Free Trade Agreement. And so all of those jobs are gone. So even if I wanted to work in that industry, it doesn't exist now. And the
Mm-hmm.
same thing for the trailer industry. I see some of you know, my father's company is called Dorsey Trailers. I see some of the trailers on the highway now as a reminder of where I come
Mm-hmm.
from. But the reality is that, as you know, technology has influenced everything, and there are fewer and fewer trailers on the highway, and the technology is coming down the pipe. As you know, they're going to have driverless. They're expected to have driverless vehicles at some point in the future. So we got to continue to fight. This conversation about technology, as you know, you and I talk about it all the time. There is got to be a way that we can all benefit from it.
That's right. That's
I
right.
want to bring on
And
the
and
call,
organize it.
right? I want to bring on the call because we were concerned when I heard about this situation in Jackson, Mississippi with the water. I wanted to reach out down there, and I have a friend I'm going to pull in. His name is Artie Armstrong. He's a consultant. He's been on the ground doing work in that space for years. Robin, you got a connection to him. I'll let it unfold, but y'all are connected. And I wanted to introduce him to the stage, Mr. Artie Armstrong. How you doing?
Doing wonderful. And thank you for having me, friend. It's a pleasure listening as well to the conversation that you're having with Miss Williams. Brings back to mind for me how I started, got to cut my teeth getting exposed to the labor movement with the A. Philip Randolph Institute at Jackson State University, and even through today, have continued a relationship with the organization, and we certainly, I appreciate the remarks around the labor movement and the difficulties that we faced, of course, here in the South, with right to work states that really uh, do everything that they can to root out union organizing and the challenges around that. That in a fashion that they try to project a perception that this would aid job creation in the South,
Mm-hmm.
and of course it's been quite the contrary.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason I kind of connected dots on this because Mr. Armstrong he talking about he's cut his teeth at Jackson State, but I think that a substantial amount of his experience came in the 80 was it 84 campaign or 88 campaign for Jesse Jackson.
Right,
Um,
right.
that's
Both of them. We worked at that. It started out with the '84 campaign. My dad, who was a Jackson City councilman. Well, he got elected in '85, but he was a community organizer prior to that and became the first African American to be elected to the Jackson City Council. But he was one of the campaign managers for Jesse for Mississippi.
right.
And I got to travel some and had a great experience with Reverend Jackson and enjoyed my time and continue to cherish those moments thinking about those times. It was a wonderful time, no doubt about it.
And that's how a lot of us got in my generation. That's how we all got kick started, because it was hopeful that that it could happen. It took till 2008 for it to happen, but it did happen. Now, the reason that I have Mr. Armstrong on the call is for the disappointing news that we heard about Jackson, and the challenges with infrastructure in Jackson pertaining to water, and basically the challenge that it has caused, the stress it has caused. It's spilling out, and the rest of the world knows about it. But there's a history of this that hopefully you can share with us, because it's not unusual that when the money that comes down to states doesn't necessarily get to the cities. And that was a Reagan goal one time. And it really plays out in the South, because Jackson, like Montgomery, Jackson, like Birmingham, Atlanta, even Baltimore, Maryland, white folks don't live in cities anymore, you know. And it really plays out in the South. And so I want you to speak to that. Can you give us a background on what the infrastructure is in the city and why this happened?
Uh, Well, yes, I think you summed it up well. Of course, as these communities evolve, we find that the demographics change in the city, and you have a lot of white flight, and then of course black leadership emerges, and then as a result, even over the time span of these events, uh, infrastructure was not addressed. And so the problem increasingly became more challenging. Um, we've piecemealed together resources with a declining tax base to try to address it. And of course, it's been quite a challenge. And the politics of so called conservative leadership, um, working again to work with progressive minded new government leadership has been challenging. And as you've eloquently put it, the resources have been minimum. We're the capital city of Mississippi, and there's concerted efforts. I'm a lobbyist in Mississippi and has been for a decade, and I can tell you that we can stand on the rooftop and scream about resources needed for our capital city, and it falls on deaf ears often. And Mississippi is now, I guess, over the past 20 years, we maybe 20 years ago we still had a few democratic statewide elected officials, and then here in the past 20 years politics in the South is coming increasingly polarized, and so you get these so-called conservative leaders who really operate in the realm of politics of race. And, they find excuses to, not expand Medicare, thinking it would benefit. It's so realizing it would only thinking it would benefit the minority population too much. We're caught in a nightmarish situation even now, where our former governor and our current governor are both linked to corruption involving millions of dollars of funds that were funneled out of the State Department of Human Services, which is the agency that helps meet the needs of our poor and indigent individuals. And so, we even have there's been a publicized text message from our former governor that talks about the way that that a person gets rich is off the backs of the poor people, which
So,
is extremely disturbing.
so if that's a
That he
practice,
rose to those
if that's a
heights.
practice with human services, it's not hard to believe that whatever funding they could have put forth for Jackson, and when we say infrastructure, the water thing is important. But I haven't been there in several years, but I have to believe that it's just not the water um, construct. Is it everything else as well?
Absolutely. Streets, we are having decaying pipes. We are under a number of consent decrees that has overwhelmed our city. And just absurd situations that the city has been placed in trying to extract resources from state government, as opposed to even direct funding to the state. They've created additional layers of commissions, which they control, and they've used to piecemeal resources to try to address some of these issues, and it's has been to little to no success. So it's really challenging. And I've every day this week, just to share, we're out passing out water and doing what we can to try to console our residents that this too shall pass and we'll get through this together. We're excited to have the Biden administration paying attention to what's going on and offering resources. We're fortunate to have a powerful congressman who has the committee chairmanship, Congressman Thompson, at the table, who is pledging resources as well. And so, because of the catastrophic recent incident that has occurred, the state has got involved in a more substantial way, and we're appreciative of it. We think it's in the late hour, but we're happy to have it, and hopefully we can resolve this without the politics turning into what we've seen in places like Detroit and even Gary, Indiana, where we've seen hostile state takeovers
Yeah.
in African American municipalities. And so obviously we're extremely concerned about those forms of taxation without representation.
So let me get this right though. You're saying that you're having to deliver water to people. Now that's good for drinking. Is there running water in the houses? Um, uh,
Yes, for most of the city, I would say that this problem is about a third of the city. Most of our city has access to water. But let me go back. You know what the experts have also said is that none of the water uh, is that any of our residents uh, have access to coming out of the pipes is drinkable water. So no one has drinkable water without first boiling it, regardless of where you live in the city.
So
And
you can take a shower in it. You just can't drink it.
you can take a shower in it, but if you're gonna cook with it, you're gonna have to boil it if you're gonna use it in any way. Um,
And
about a third of the city is either having no pressure or low pressure. So
now
they don't
this,
have access to even that.
what side of town is this? You said a third or 30%?
Mostly South Jackson. Mostly
Who,
South Jackson. That's
who is
where
in
the root of
who
the
is in South
problem. Of
Jackson?
course, that's a predominantly African American area.
So that doesn't bode well. Now, my next question is, who are the consensus builders? I mean, I get that there's some polarization. I get that, we got bad political stuff. Who are the leaders who are saying all of that doesn't matter now? People need water. People need access. Who's in that group of people?
Well, I think everybody is being, with with the eyes of the nation watching. I think we have everybody at the table. Finally, the governor Tate Reeves is at the table for sure these days. He's having news conferences daily. Also has engaged the National Guard. Our lieutenant governor is at the table. Our speaker is at the table. And then, of course, the mayor, and along with Congressman Thompson, and even our county elected officials.
So this is the first time that has happened.
Yes. As it relates to this specific issue, it's definitely the first time this has happened.
Well, I mean, if it took a crisis to bring people together, let's take advantage of a crisis, as they always say. But my point, I'm getting back to my point, and that is, I think it's good that you have the water. That seems like a temporary solution. Have they reported on what it would take to be successful at having this entire network of water system, pipe, infrastructure? I don't even know where to begin. Um, but have they explained what it would take for this thing to be running the way it's supposed to be in perpetuity?
They have. The state has, to some extent, they have. They're starting to replace some of the equipment at the main facility, and that was what is in need. The state has purchased some equipment that I think they're making around the clock effort to install, and I think that's going to alleviate a lot of the problems that we're facing with low pressure, and with being able to purify the water as it needs to be.
Excellent.
And
Well,
of course, the other issue too, one other major uh, s- issue that we've had is we have not ramped up staffing in the way that we have needed to from the city, and I think the state is trying to help facilitate that some for us as well.
this is staff for the water infrastructure
For the
or
water
water
treatment
plant.
facility, the water
Right.
treatment facility, we have not had enough operators that are city employees and that are qualified to operate some of the equipment there on a constant basis. And so that has also undermined our ability to properly serve our citizens with the
So
with the appropriate water.
so now that's not a state issue there. Is that correct? That's a local municipality issue, correct?
Ab-
Or is it
Absolutely.
the case? Is it the case that is it the case that that's the goal all along, to have a state takeover of the water infrastructure or the plant. Because if it's a state run plant, you at least have money, but I'm sure you would be taxed for it to be run properly. Is that the goal?
Hopefully that is not the goal. I've heard some of uh, some of our leadership, especially our Senate delegation, who has been the most outspoken group that I have seen to level pressure uh, on state government to take action. I think that if they can help us make these necessary repairs, the ideal situation for us is we need to continue to maintain control, no doubt about it.
Well, it breaks my heart to hear about this. I guess this is consistent with what we saw in Flint. Not that anybody's being the water is contaminated, but it is I guess some benign neglect that led to it. And once you start letting things kind of slip through the cracks, it becomes more and more substantial. And quite frankly, this is as big as it gets, because everyone needs water. I don't think there's a way to get around it. You need water to do anything. And in this situation, it just sends a bad message. I think that one of the, I guess, more recent celebrities, if you will, in the city of Jackson that was transplanted there, is Deion Sanders, and he's coaching at Jackson State University. And you know, it doesn't help when the man's name is Prime Time. When he starts talking about it, if you didn't know about it before, you know about it now. And he made, I think, I don't even think he was trying to embarrass anybody, but just explaining that he would not allow his players to be in a situation where they would be without water, which means being without air, which means being without showers. The list goes on. And Deion Sanders is a lot of things, but one thing he is plain spoken. And when he made those list of things that his players would be without, he wasn't going to allow them to do it. He was making the speech that the mayor should be making, the governor should be making, and any other elected official should be making. But they do politics. He does not. So I think it's, you and I have talked about him being the coach there since he's been there, but I think that he became more than a coach when he made that statement.
Right. Primetime's doing a wonderful job. He has been transplanted to our city, and I was one of the first to say that his presence here in our community has been the best thing that has happened to Jackson in the last 20, 25 years. You know, he's brought so much light to my great alma mater. He's brought so much positive attention to our great city. Um, he's a walking billboard.
And he
What he
packed the
said,
stadium.
yes, we got to get a stadium. We have to get our own stadium, and hopefully, the state can come together and help us get a stadium that is comparable to some at the ones that they built at the Caucasian institutions of higher ed. So that's where the politics has been, and Jackson State has the highest attendance record ratings of any HBC and most FBS schools in the nation. So it warrants for a quality stadium that's comparable to Ole Miss and Mississippi State. However, we've been far apart so far in the negotiations on a stadium. And of course, again, the other big issue we've been even around the stadium too is that we need a facility on our campus.
Right.
We're the only college that I know of that that students can't walk to the stadium that live on campus,
Yeah, I did.
and
I would.
so it sort of takes away from the college experience.
So let me get this right. Jackson has never had a stadium on campus.
No, our stadium, uh, I think, prior to when I was born, they may have had some small facility that they used, might have been on campus. And
Hmm.
then when we came into modern times, the state of Mississippi allowed us to access a stadium that they owned in the middle of town, not at our university. And we continue to play our games at that stadium and
Right.
have been for the last 40 years for sure.
So that's
And
the.
we have been, before prime time came to town, we were not seriously considered to get any sort of support from the state, um, of any beyond some facility that would mirror that of the suburban high schools.
So
And
let me ask
but
you a question. So I didn't know that, first of all. Um, and but you're in a very uh, precarious situation now, because it's going to be a difficult conversation to have when water is a priority, to ask for a stadium. So that would literally take new tax dollars to do, that would be separated out of what we're talking about with the infrastructure for water. So it's just a crazy situation, and we ain't got enough time to talk about it. But I did want to bring Robin Williams back on, because I want to close this conversation with talking about the work that you're doing in the grassroots to do elections this year, because you're working with Black Voters Matter, and Ms. Williams has connections with that organization as well.
oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
hey Arnie, how are you?
Hey, Miss
I
Williams, you doing good?
I am. I am. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. We holding up well down here in the face of all this adversity.
Yeah, I just talked to President Derek Johnson, NAACP, on yesterday about the situation there. You know, I've done a lot of work there with Latasha Brown,
Oh, fantastic.
Black voters. Yeah, absolutely. I'm from the UFCW, United Food and Commercial Workers Union.
Right on,
So
right on.
yeah, so Willie, yeah, so this election is very important. From even what we're facing down in Mississippi, right? Um, it's why Black folks need to understand their power, need to understand that we need to get out to vote. Like you talked about the infrastructure money hitting the states. What is happening with that money? Why isn't it repairing the damage that caused this water crisis in Jackson? Being what 85% Black. you know, so it's important for us to get out to vote this election and vote every election. Every election matters, from who the president will be, but who your mayor will be. You know, they have these city administrators now that they have put in place to really uh, 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 you know um, prevent Black mayors and other people of color from putting good policies in place to protect their residents. They're putting, these managers in now, trying to block some of the things that we need for our community to make sure that we have clean water, that we have the infrastructure that we need, the right streets, the right resources in our communities. We have to get out and vote the right people in. Now, I have watched on the news, brother, about what's happening in Mississippi. The last time I was in Mississippi, we had that meatpacking raid. You know that raid we had? More than 600 meatpacking workers were taken out of plants down there. I was there doing that raid.
Yeah, we're full of challenges.
Since this crisis happened, I've watched some of the Republican commentators on the news. Instead of going after the governor, they are going after the mayor and saying this is the problem of the mayor, the Jackson mayor, and the mismanagement of the mayor. No, it's the mismanagement of a city that is predominantly Black. That's what it is. I know because I grew up in Washington, D.C., where we needed our streets repaired. We needed infrastructure there, and we did not get it until gentrification. And now, if you go through the streets of Washington, D.C., even in Northeast DC, where I grew up, they got all kinds of brand new infrastructure everywhere. That when I was growing up, the Blacks were advocating to have repairs done. We needed new water pipes and things like that. We needed our streets repaired. All that's happening now, Willie, because it's gentrification time. So this is why we need to get out and vote. Natasha Brown, my sister, does an excellent job with Black Voters Matter. Melanie Campbell does an excellent job with Black Women's Roundtable. And brother, my sister there in Mississippi, she is advocating for good water there from the Black Women's Roundtable there in Jackson.
Oh
And so
yeah,
Andy and
Cassandra Weldon. She's a good friend.
Cassandra Weld, she is advocating. She's a fighter. She's Black Women's Roundtable, which I'm a part of. But we have activists, we have to get out, and we have to get out in these communities and talk about this is the reason that we must register and we must vote. When we understand our power, we go to the polls. When we understand our power, we demand what we need. Now,
Right.
money has come in for infrastructure. And before I had to leave briefly, I heard you talk about the corruption and how much, some of these statewide politicians have taken from you money that's
From the little
supposed to be.
people. I
That's
mean,
right.
you talking about women, single family households with that are on welfare and I mean human services is unconscionable that resources would they even took resources from human services to build a volleyball stadium for the University of Mississippi because one of a Hall of Fame football player, Brent Favre, said that he didn't want his daughter, who was on the volleyball team, playing in an old stadium. So they took money out of human services for the needy to fund this project,
a
which is
a
unbelievable.
volleyball stadium, rather
Wow.
for them, their children, the
And
privilege
this is
to
all
play volleyball.
documented. I'm not just espousing comments that I've heard or some of this kind of rambling like the election was stolen that we hear from the Trumps side and the MAGA crowd. This you can go to Mississippi Today, anybody who's listening, and archive any of these. They have complete storylines just over the last 6 months that document specifically all of these, and none of these people have been brought to justice.
Yes,
Brent
and you know
Favre
what? But
took $1
and you
million
know what you have to
from
do?
human services to
You
speak.
have to take that information that you know, we must take that information and we must sit in people's living rooms. We must sit anywhere we can go. While you're talking about the water crisis, talk about why it's important to vote. When you're talking about the water crisis, give them a voter registration form. Tell them, expose what is, and connect that to the reason why we must vote all across this country. We must vote. Now, I'll say that the NAACP has done an excellent job with preparing messaging for our voters. We are not a cookie cutter nation. You must get the right narrative and the right message that's going to get your voters out in Mississippi, our voters out here in Maryland, the voters out in Georgia. We must take this information and we must empower our people with information so they can get inspired to go to the polls. The only way things will change is that we must demand change. And we have the power to vote. Let's use that. We are working with labor. The NAACP is working with labor to make sure that we can cover the spaces. We need to work with community, the churches, the fraternities, sororities. If I will encourage you right now in Jackson, Mississippi, to get with the partners, start to do some convenings right now. Right now, do some convenings and start targeting some folks that you need to move out of office and put the right people in there. It may take more than one election to do it, but we cannot give up. We didn't give up in Georgia. We did
That's
not give
right.
up in Georgia. Helen
Yeah.
Butler has been doing the work in Georgia for many years. And then Stacy came along. Latasha has been doing this work. I worked on the ground in Georgia. So it didn't happen overnight that we turned blue under and voted the Democratic way or Biden or voted just for the right candidates. It didn't happen overnight. So we must do the work everywhere. And we cannot leave out the South, brother. I have done most of my union organizing in the South. I have hit the ground in Mississippi many a times. Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, done Oregon, North Carolina with Reverend Barber. I have worked in the South. The South is powerful. But until our people know their power, we're going to continue to talk and lose. We must sit in living rooms, kitchens, talk to folks at the church, and we must get people to understand we have the power to create change and we must do it now. We got a year and a half before the 2024 election. Let's get our people to the polls. Let's not just sit down and think we're defeated. We are never defeated. We're going to fight until we no longer have breath to fight. So I encourage people to please honor the workers this weekend. Is Labor Day weekend. Honor the workers. Not everybody has Labor Day as a holiday. Service workers real still will be working. So if the Kroger stores are still open there, my brother in Jackson, tell my union members, tell them thank you, for the continue to work, not just and through the pandemic, that crisis, but now you got the water crisis going on. So
Thank you.
blessings to all of you. Willie, thank you so much for
Thank
allowing me
you.
to join you all today.
Yeah, thank you for representing labor well, as always. And I want to thank Brother Artie for jumping on. As she explained, the struggle continues. We got to keep fighting. And that change. If we let up, all these things fall apart. So we got to get back to basics.
Right
Bring that
on.
peace.
Right on. Thank both of y'all so much. I'm even more encouraged by listening to Sister Williams in her ministry work, and I appreciate it. And we have a great state coordinator for Black Voters Matter here, Carol Blackman, who's been doing a fantastic job and working with Natasha and the people from Atlanta. And so We're going to be continuing that work and continue to roll our sleeves up all the way through November. We're going to register some folks to vote, and we're going to get our folks out to the polls. No question about it.
All right.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
All
Thank both
right.
of you.
Blessings.
Like I said, the connection, the great connection is what we do at the grassroots level. These infrastructure issues are in Baltimore City, they're in Jackson, Mississippi, and all the cities are anywhere where Black folks assemble. So it's on us to do it because nobody else will. I want to thank y'all again. Peace out.
Right on. I look forward